Hi, I'm Stephanie Watt. This is my husband, Tony Watt. This is our 6th attempt at this video tonight because children and siblings
I need a
and
drink.
life. So we we are going to have another candid conversation tonight with another form of a caregiver. We spoke with my mom previously, and today we're going to speak with Dad. Tony and I switched places about a year ago. I went to work after 8.5, almost 9 years, and he became stay-at-home dad after he retired. He says yes, but I don't know. He enjoys it. So we switched places, and so I'm going to get his point of view pre-staying at home and post-staying at home. So, pre-staying at home, I went into labor with Emma about 1:30 in the morning. It was me, him, and Colton. He had to drive me 30 miles away to Seminole, Texas. He got me there in about 18 minutes. At the time, it was so early in the morning, I wasn't comfortable calling friends. Later on, those said friends lectured us for not calling. And they happily took Colton. So Tony drove Colton back to Hobbs, 30 miles away, and then drove back to Seminole so he could make it in time for the ambulance to follow the ambulance to Lubbock to the NICU. When Emma was born, Tony wasn't in the room. He had to stay with Colton. And I was told by the anesthesiologist what was going on. Wonderful lady. I don't remember her name. She was an amazing lady, though. She gave me the updates. Emma was 4 weeks early. She was telling me she was having trouble breathing. I thought it was just because she was 4 weeks early and that maybe her lungs weren't developed yet. And then she told me that, she looked a little bit different. She told me that her fingers and toes were fused together. She prayed with me. She held my hand. She was very comforting. I thought that they had been giving Tony updates. And Seminole was a town of about 9,000 people. The hospital's very small. I found out once I got back to the room that he had no idea what was going on. So why don't you tell us what happened?
The doctor that we were supposed to have wasn't there that weekend. So we had an on-call. And he came, we had Emma. I say we. She had Emma. And they came out and they had a look on their face that they didn't know what to say, how to say it, anything like that. So they was like, hey, we need to talk to you and show you your daughter. So we walked out, and in the hallway, they had this cubicle that was set up, and they were trying to keep her breathing and doing all the life-saving things that they could. They showed me Emma, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if she knew what was going on. I just learned about it. They told us that they were going to life flight her out because they couldn't keep her breathing on her own. They had a lot of concerns. So I had no idea what was going on. Didn't know what to do. Didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to think. I mean, it was like information overload at that point. All I knew is that we had an issue that we had to figure out. So they came back a couple hours later, 2 or 3 hours later, about 4 or 5 hours later.
It was about 5 hours later, so she was bagged for about 5 hours.
Yeah, she was bagged for about 5 hours. They said that they had canceled the helicopter for the life flight, and they had an ambulance that was on the way. Supposed to have been there within the hour, so I knew I had enough time to take Colton, run all the way back to Hobbs, drop him off, run all the way back to Seminole, put fuel in my truck and meet the ambulance, and that way we could go to Lubbock. So by the time I got there, I was, kind of frantic. I had been calling everybody saying, hey, this is what's going on. I called my bosses, and the bosses I had at the time were phenomenal. They was like, you take care of family. Family is first. So they just wanted updates. So we got the ambulance there, and I followed them all the way to the hospital in Lubbock. We got everything set up there. Everything is kind of like a blur because you have all these doctors that are coming in and talking about, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, and no, this is what we're going to do, and no, everything changes every minute, it seemed like. I do remember that 2 days later, we had gotten Steph out of the hospital. Her OBGYN was like phenomenal. He was, you do this and I'll cut you loose.
Yeah, and at this point, when Tony followed the ambulance to Lubbock, I saw at that point, I had seen Emma in a hallway as they wheeled me down the hall. They stopped at a doorway. I saw them working on her and bagging her. I wasn't able to see her. The next time I saw her was a couple hours later in an incubator hooked up to a ventilator, had tubes and cords and wires and everything else. And I saw her for long enough for me to sign the consent form, tell her I'd see her later, and they were gone. And I didn't see her again for another 2 days. Yeah.
So, and after the 2 days, she had talked to her doctor, her OBGYN, and was like, she's got to go. She's got to be out of there so she can be with her daughter. And he understood that. That's one of the things that most doctors don't do is understand the parent side of it. I guess that's one of the good things that we were into a small little town, 9,000, 10,000 people. He understood that family would come first. So what he did was he basically released Steph. I got her in the truck and we headed to Lubbock. We got there and all these doctors were just hitting us from all different angles. And they're just piling all of this information on. And we had no idea what was happening, what was being said. We could see our daughter. She was right there, but we couldn't touch her. The funny part of it is, to me, it was kind of comical, is that my phone started going off. Not my work phone, but my personal phone kept going off. And I kept giving hey, no, I'm not talking right now. I just, I call it one thing. The button. And then they got a hold of Steph and was like, hey, I need to talk to Tony, which was at the time, the grand poobah of the Shriners. And he was like, anything that you need, it's yours. And at this point, I had no idea what was going on. And I told him, I have no clue. And he and his wife and all the Shriners were like fantastic because they were helping us learn stuff. We found an ENT, neurosurgeons, and orthopedics. They started to actually draw on whiteboards. Okay, this is what's going on here. This is what you need to do. This is what's happening here. This is what's going on here. This is why this is going on. They were taking 3D modeling of our head. That way we could understand what was happening.
And this was in the NICU in Lubbock at UMC. And they were going through and had a whole team of people. Like, we would go to lunch and we would come back. Not that we ate anything, but we would come back.
It was coffee and basically it.
Yeah, we would come back and there would be a new doctor in the room.
Yes.
At this point, that's how we would meet her doctors. Was we would come back and there'd be a new doctor.
Yeah.
And new information. So once we finally were able to figure out, okay, they're about 99% positive that she has Apert syndrome. And we just need to send off genetic testing to confirm it. At that point, it was a little bit more manageable. He had gotten us into Ronald McDonald House, which has been and still continues to this day to be amazing. Anytime we have multiple appointments in Lubbock, we call them and they get us in, and they're wonderful. Ronald McDonald House is wonderful.
Yes.
So he got us set up with Ronald McDonald House, and we were able to have a place to stay. He had to go back to work.
I worked every single day, Monday through Sunday, 12 hours a day, just so I could do that disconnect from reality of what was actually happening. That's how I coped with reality, is go to work and work and work and work and work and work. The GM and all the bosses that I had were like, go, you need to be with the family. And I was like, this is the only way that I can cope with what's happening with all the surgeries and everything. They were telling us we have to do this and this. I mean, there was a million things in my head that was going on that I thought, okay, we've got all this stuff we have to do. I'm not going to be any good with making a decision. I can't make a decision on where we go to dinner at, let alone this one that's sitting right here. I couldn't make a decision that I felt was life threatening. So I didn't feel that I could make that decision. So my decision was work as much as possible. I would leave work, pick Colton up. We would go to the hospital, which was an hour and a half away. Stay there till midnight?
Yeah.
Midnight, turn around, drive all the way back home, which is in Hobbs, an hour and a half away. Get a couple hours of sleep. I would drop Colton off and I would go to work, and I'd work 12 hours, and I was doing that. That was my vicious cycle, is work. And that's how I was able to cope with life at that point. Even though everybody was saying, stop, just stop, take a minute just to breathe. I couldn't do it because then emotions would have kicked in, which I'm not a very emotional person. I'm not. So if I were to have stopped, emotions would have kicked in. The good thing was that Steph had her mom here, which was staying at Ronald McDonald House, and Colton was able to stay with her Oma, her grandma, at Ronald McDonald House, and they were able to see Steph every single day. I was driving back and forth every single day. I did that for a year. And then I took some time off, and then we started to learn what was going on, how this was working, and what was going on with her head, everything. My son, which he will flat out tell you, he knows more than anybody out there, which he was told flat out by a neurosurgeon that you have more information in your head than a third-year resident. He takes it quite literally.
It wasn't good for any of us, the amount of time that we spent in the hospital. And
they were coming and taking, before they would tell us what was going on after a surgery, they were giving me the blood pressure cuff and taking all my vitals to make sure that I wasn't going to die of a heart attack.
And they would kick me out.
Yeah, they would, yeah.
There's been several times where they've kicked me out because I needed to take a break. And so I just want to say that Emma's case is different. When she was first diagnosed, she was diagnosed as more mild. We found out 3 months in. So she spent about 21 days in the NICU. She had to get a feeding tube when we were in the NICU so we could go home. And at that point, we were willing to get her the feeding tube so we could go home and we could continue trying to bottle feed. The bottle feeding just, it didn't work because her nasal cavities were fused. So she couldn't breathe and suck and swallow at the same time. So it just didn't work. And honestly, if I'm being completely honest, between her struggling to do that and us having appointments at the hospital an hour and a half away almost every day for the first year, it was easier just for us to hook her up to her feeding pump. We had her in the back seat and it was the car bed. So she tested out of the NICU to go home in a car bed because she couldn't sit up yet and breathe because at that point in time she didn't have her trach. So she went home in a car bed, and it was just easier for us to hang the feeding bag on the little the window, on the little suit hook, the hanger hook by the window. And it was just easier for us to hook her up to the feeding pump, hit the button, and drive back and forth to these appointments because her feeding schedule was every 2 hours. So she stayed hooked up for the first year. She stayed hooked up to the feeding tube 24 hours a day. And it was just easier for us. Now we're at a point to where we do gravity feeds and she eats by mouth. It's still not enough to sustain her getting the feeding tube out, but she does well now. But going back to, we got out of the NICU after 21 days. She had her cranial vault reconstruction at 3 months old. She had it on Halloween. She got her distractors in, and her distractors they look like little ladybug antennas. And what the distractors do is they go in, they do the zigzag scar. They go in and they basically open back up the sutures that have closed that cause the craniosynostosis. And they have to do that so her brain has the proper room to grow. So we had the distractors in. She was supposed to have those in for about 40 days. We got to day 37.
Yeah,
and
37.
She got a CSF leak. The screw had nicked the dura. It caused the CSF leak. They had to go in, take out all the hardware, all the distractors, all the hardware, and replace it with dissolvable plates and screws. They did that. She went home, thought everything was great. She got another leak. And then we found that she had hydrocephalus.
Well, back up just a tad bit there. What we didn't realize is that until we got the CFS leak and it hit the dura and everything, and they put the plastic plates and screws to hold her skull together, is that with Apert Syndrome, the body, when it's being built, so when it's in the womb, it goes off of a blueprint, and everything has to be specific to that blueprint, obviously. So for Apert, or pretty much any child out there, that in the early stages, the body is told to go back to the blueprint. So it's always fighting itself. So we were trying to open up the cavity in her skull for her brain to grow and to give it room. And the skull was always trying to force itself back to the original state in which it was built.
And this is what our neurosurgeon, this is kind of how he explained it to us in layman's terms. And this was the reasons why we were doing some of the things later, because he had stated that the later the surgeries are done, the better chance that it had of the body not trying to revert back. which we didn't know that about the syndrome and syndromic kids, and that they wanted to do the less invasive one that a lot of other parents have done that have been very successful. And Emma, that's when we found out that Emma was more on the severe scale rather than the mild scale that we were originally told, because her body wouldn't have been able to sustain yes, this is Colton, this is Emma's brother. Her body wouldn't have been able to sustain the endoscopic surgery with the helmet. It was explained to us the reason why is that her body would have tried to revert back to closing the sutures. So that's why we opted for the more invasive and the distractors, because every surgeon is different. But a lot of kids have had large amounts of success with the endoscopic route and the helmet, and it's been very successful, and they haven't had to do any other procedures. So it just really depends on the child. But that's kind of when we found out that Emma was more on the severe side, is when we started having to have all these extra things done. And with Emma, we also had to get her a trach. We fought that tooth and nail for 6 months.
Yeah.
She coded on us 4 times during that 6 months. Once in the car with him, once in the car with me, and twice at the hospital.
That's the parent's worst nightmare.
And 3 times in front of him.
Yeah.
And that's when we finally gave in and said, you know what, maybe we don't know better than the doctor.
At first we thought we knew what we was doing, and then whenever we actually got to the doctor that came in and said, okay, this is what we need to do, this is what you should do. We did a little research and come to find out that we wasn't very smart.
We were wrong.
We were wrong.
And 3 out of those 4 times, he's the one that told us what was happening in the backseat.
Yeah. So we decided to go ahead and do it. I was still against it, but the way they explained it, and they explained it extremely well. He actually drew how on a whiteboard the skull, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth, the larynx, the esophagus, the lungs, how it all works, and how this was going. It was a very minor procedure.
Yeah.
Very minor procedure. I was thinking that it was going to be this big, long production of surgery, which we had gone through multiple times with her head and stuff. And he was like, oh no. He goes, anesthesia takes more time than I'm going to. And literally, we had the trach put in, and he come out and he was like, hey, it's all done. It's over with. This should help her out 100%.
And she had to stay sedated for 7 days.
Yeah.
Just
because
the stoma needed time to heal. With the G-tube, if the tube comes out, it starts closing immediately. And so by the time, if we don't put something, if that tube closes and we don't put something in it, by the time we get to Lubbock, that hole for her feeding tube would be closed and she would have to have another surgery to reopen it. With the trach, it's healed so much that at that point, after that 7 days, it'll start closing, but it's not something to where we have to put something in it and rush an hour and a half away. It's something to where we would have time. But they sedated her for 7 days. From my understanding in other cases that I've watched and that I've seen on Facebook in trach and G-tube communities, is that 7 days is about standard afterwards for healing time. And then they do the first trach change. And I got the joy of doing the first trach change. I got the joy of doing the first G-tube change.
I wasn't going to do it. I was terrified.
It was terrifying. But Emma was a more severe case. Not all Apert kids will go through this. And the look on my face. Do you remember the look on my face?
I do.
So we were at the general surgeon's office, and this was after the G-tube. It was the G-tube follow-up. And he was showing me what to do, how much water to put in the balloon to keep the balloon open, and how to take the water out, how to pull the G-tube out, how to put it back in. And I was like, oh, okay. And he looked at me and he goes, no, not okay. And he hands it to me.
Her face turned white and she was like, uh-oh.
What? And he hands it to me and he goes, no, you do it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean I do it? And he's like, you do it. So he made me do it. Yeah. He made me put the G-tube in, fill the balloon, and do the thing.
Yeah.
So that was fun. So that was my first experience with the G-tube. And then fast forward another 6 months after that, I was doing the first trach change. And ENT was at bedside, and he's like, okay, so you hold it at 3. You're looking at a clock. You hold it at 3. You put it in. You rotate it to 6. And then it's in. And I'm like, so how do I know it's in? How do I know it's where it's supposed to be? And he's like, because you're not, he's like, you'll know. It'll go in easily. It'll be fine. And I'm like, it'll be fine.
Famous last words. Yeah, famous last words.
He hands it to me. And he's like, okay, start at 3, or you can start at 9 and go to 6. He's like, just as long as you start here and go here. I'm like,
try it on the dummy.
Okay. Did I try it on the dummy?
Oh,
you did the dummy first.
So there was also a dummy that I practiced on, which I don't remember doing. But apparently I practiced on the dummy.
Yeah.
The dummy is...
It's creepy.
It is creepy, but it's much easier than doing it on your child because it's a dummy.
It doesn't move.
And you're not meeting resistance with the dummy.
So with Emma, whenever you start it, I'm left-handed, so whenever I start at 3 and I turn to 6, and it's so with this little one here, she's going.
She does that now.
She still does it.
Back then, it wasn't as bad. So, now it's gotten more challenging because she's older.
Yeah. Okay. So Bubba would like to say something.
Oh, what would you like to say, Bubba?
I was the one that was offering to put the trach in of the G-tube, and both of them were saying no.
Yeah, but you was also 5 years old.
You were 5 years old at the time.
You were 5. Even though now he is very proficient.
He is.
In
but I haven't
anything.
put the trach in or the G-tube yet.
He hasn't yet, but he can tell you how to do it. He can tell you all the steps leading up to it. He can tell you exactly what to do.
So, first, you grab water and, what's it called?
Hydrogen peroxide.
Hydrogen peroxide 50-50. 2 Q-tips, the long ones, but not double-sided. 2 packs, and 4... And HME, you need your trach collar, and 2x2.
And we do that every single
night.
Every night we do the trach care. Every 2 weeks we change the trach itself.
Yes.
And he can tell you exactly how to do it, like he just did.
Whenever we do the next trach change and YouTube change, can I do it?
We'll see.
So how are you guys feeling now? So how is your thoughts of Dad being home compared to Mom being home?
I would love both of y'all to be home.
But
Daddy takes us more. Daddy takes us more to places.
Wow. In my defense, I was in school and going to doctor's appointments for her.
She would only take me to McDonald's every month.
So what do I do?
Sometimes,
it doesn't go every day. Here, you come over here and sit down.
Sometimes he lets me go 2 times a day.
2 times a day?
No, one day for lunch and one day for breakfast, and then we take a break.
Oh.
That's not true.
Yes, it is!
Okay, so we're off topic. I told you it would be very candid, and now it's become very candid with children.
Me? I'm like a kid.
Yeah, I love the children.
So Dad, how are you feeling now with doing the appointments? I'm still mostly making the appointments and putting them on the calendar. And he doesn't have to worry about the therapies as much. She has speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy. She gets those now at school. So we don't have people coming to the house anymore to do her therapy. So that's another thing lifted off of him. So what does your day look like with Emma and the appointments and taking care of them?
The fortunate thing is I only have like once every couple of weeks of going to Lubbock and doing follow-ups and make sure everything is good. I don't really want to say what my actual day looks like because then you'll get mad at me.
We basically live in Lubbock.
And no.
Not so much anymore. We did for a while.
You can say that.
But yeah, now
And
they've graduated
now.
to living to the pool for the summer.
So we're kind of living in the pool.
I see.
What does Emma's schedule look like for you compared to what it looked like for me?
Oh, it's completely 100% different. She gets up at 6:30, 7 o'clock every morning. I feed her, change her, make sure everything is good, change her HME if I need to. Around 10:30, 11 o'clock, I get her to lay down, take a nap. She gets up at 1-ish, 1:30-ish. She plays, feed her. So, she'll get fed 3 to 4 times a day. And she just wants to watch Bob and show her attitude.
She plays with brothers. She does.
She
She
plays
likes
with dog.
to swim. She plays with the dog. She loves bothering the dog.
Oh, yeah.
The poor dog.
The dog's always getting harassed.
The dog tolerates her very well. But for the most part, I was going, I would say a minimum of 3 times a week to Lubbock. And there were some weeks that we would just stay at Ronald McDonald House. Colton and I and Emma would just stay at Ronald McDonald House.
It was easier.
And he would drive back and forth because it was easier. It was less fuel, and it was just easier for us to do instead of getting up super early and driving back and forth.
Yeah.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to a new Apert parent?
Be the advocate. Ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. The more information you can get, if they start talking over your head, tell them, I don't understand you. You've got to understand exactly what they're saying, what they're not saying, how they're saying it. You're the voice of the child. So make sure you don't think that you're overstepping your bounds. Ask the questions.
And sometimes
They
it's
will
okay to play good cop, bad cop.
Oh, I do that. Yeah, we do that a lot.
We will do that. A lot of times, and I feel kind of bad saying it, but I kind of don't. The new doctors, and bless their heart, they're trying. They've got this new stature. They're trying to learn. They're doing all the different rotations, and they're trying. But some of them come at you in not so good of a way, where they think that their book is smarter than the parent that lives with them day in and day out and knows their child inside and out. And it's okay to, when I get tired of the silly, nonsensical questions that are sometimes asked that could have been answered by reading the chart. When I get irritated with that, him and I switch places and I unleash him because he's not pleasant in the morning.
I'm not a pleasant person to be with in the mornings.
And so but it's good though, because many times we've seen these residents actually stop and say, okay, wait a minute, and start asking questions and start getting the information. And one resident in particular that I do want to highlight, because we've watched her come so far. She came in, and this is a Grey's Anatomy reference, but she came in and she was shy. She was uncertain. She didn't know what questions to ask. And I got so frustrated with her, bless her heart. And I have watched her turn into Bailey over the past 3 years. And she is now chief resident. She's amazing. The last time that he encountered her, she told her residents, ask the parents, because the parents are the best resource. And we've just watched her grow, and she's amazing.
Yeah,
she's amazing.
She does a really good
phenomenal
job. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
but definitely advocate. You are the voice for your child, and it's your child inside and out. You see your child 24 hours a day. So definitely advocate for your child. And is there anything from a big brother standpoint that you would like to say to other older siblings that might help them in their journey?
Just listen to the doctor, because that's what's gotten me so far.
Okay.
And whenever they look at you funny, just say, I'm just paying attention to my little sibling. That's all.
So with Dr. Colton, we're going to go ahead and we're going to end the very candid conversation that was candid and very all over the place because of children.
Why are you saying me?
And like always, please feel free to reach out. That's what we're here for. That's what this channel's here for. I will link our email as always in the comment section. And I hope you enjoyed our video with our family. And we will talk to you again soon.
Bye.